Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today is going to be a budget deck profile video, and it's going to be, I guess, a double feature considering, well, this is pretty much the same deck. You could just run it with either a black low end or a red low end, depending on what of the two Three Musketeers you want to be supporting. So Three Musketeers, for the most part, is a really cheap and efficient budget deck to be playing around with, because the only really expensive card that Three Musketeers generally will use is going to be beelstarmon, and without beelstarmon, you still have some very good options in terms of how you could build a Three Musketeers deck with only two Musketeers. So obviously with the two different colors being black or red, the black low end is going to better support Digimon, and the red low end is going to support Musketeers. So each of their colors are going to be focusing more on them, and the other one is just going to act as a support. But the important thing is that the options and top end are basically going to be the exact same, just because we have two very fantastic Digimon to act as some solid transitions to be able to run our deck without the loss of any Digivolution consistency. So I'm just going to be going over each of the two decks relatively quickly, so it's not going to be as in-depth as I normally am, just because, well, I'm covering two decks, but for the most part, the top end is going to be the same for the decks, just because there's no real reason for me to change it. So starting off with the black version of the deck, I'm going to be running 4 copies of ToyAgumon because it's the best generic Digitama we have, with an inheritable on-delete ability to check the top card of our deck, and if it's a black Digimon, add it to our hand. Otherwise, it goes to the bottom of the deck. Just, again, one of the better generic Digitamas that we have to be playing around with, because it's not interacting with anything specific. But we do also have the 5th Digitama being Kaporimon, because it is interacting with the blocker ability, which Gundramon, being the main mega for the black variation, is a blocker. So it's the only other Digitama that makes sense for us to be running, unless you're running a level 7 build and incorporating level 7s, but that's a different story. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of ToyAgumon just for the reboot inheritable ability, because, again, Gundramon is a blocker, so having a reboot blocker is just a really good thing to be doing, because they have synergy with each other, allowing us to attack and defend at the same time. And even at worst, if you slap this on Musketeers, it's still just a pretty decent ability to have, making Musketeers harder to attack into. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Chuumon. So Chuumon has the ability to stop the opponent from gaining memory except by their Tamer abilities. So that's really important, trying to stop their memory manipulating shenanigans as long as Chuumon's on the field, limiting what they can and can't do. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Chuumon. So Chuumon is just another really fantastic rookie for us to be playing with, because he has the security ability. Even though he doesn't play himself up from the security, the fact that we still have more effects that are triggering from our security makes him really good, because his security ability is de-digivolve 1 on one of the opponent's Digimon, making it very annoying for them to try to keep a solid evolution stack. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of ToyAgumon, acting as a draw engine for the deck, because he has the inheritable ability when the opponent doesn't attack with one of their Digimon, then at the end of their turn we get to draw a card, and, well, this being a defensive control style deck allows us to use Gundramon to try to wall out the opponent's Digimon, on top of the fact that we also can use this ability paired up with all of our removal effects to get rid of their Digimon, so that way they don't have one on the field, in order to get extra card draws from ToyAgumon, making him just have a really good synergy with what the deck is trying to do, on top of the fact that black does have a slight lack in draw cards, so anywhere we could put in some extra draw is always nice. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tankmon. So this is a flex spot for the black version of the deck. This could really be anything you feel like you want it to be. I'm just using Tankmon just because he is a very efficient card to be digivolving into, so that way we could get into our higher stages as quickly as we possibly can, because he evos for 1. But again, this could be anything you feel like you want to be running. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Digimon. So Digimon is one of those cards that's not going to change no matter which version of the deck you're going to be running, because this supports both decks. So what this card is doing is he has the on-play ability, so we don't even need to worry about evolving into him to get this ability off, and his on-play ability is your stereotypical digging ability. So we get to check the top 4 cards of our deck, and then add 1 Digimon with 3 Musketeers in its type, and or 1 option card with a memory cost of 7. 7 from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the trash. So he's just looking for our options in Three Musketeers, so we could, well, use our options in Three Musketeers. Then he also has this nice upside where he has a Warp Digivolving ability, where we could Digivolve him into a Three Musketeers typed Digimon from our hand for 6 and ignore the rest of its Digivolution requirements. So he just allows us to go literally from our level 4 to our level 6s and to allow us to use our level 6s no matter what in some new and powerful ways in case we don't see any of our level 5s, and that's just pretty good. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Dark Tyrannomon. So this is just another flex spot of the deck. It doesn't necessarily have to be Dark Tyrannomon. I do recommend running a blocker because this is a more defensive style of deck. So if you want to run any other blocker, by all means do so. I'm just running Dark Tyrannomon because he comes with the black starter deck, because you already have some black starter deck cards already in here. And on top of the fact that he is a tempo efficient blocker, allowing us to evo into a blocker for 1 in case we need to use him to just have a quick and easy blocker, or if we need to just try to Digivolve into our higher stages as quickly as we possibly can, then he accomplishes both roles. Now, onto the high end. So our high end being our level 5s and level 6s in option lineup really isn't going to be changing just because I don't necessarily think we're hard locked to these. It's just recommended to run Transition Digimon so that way it makes our evolutions as consistent and easy as we could possibly make them. Even though they are swapping between a couple of different colors, it just doesn't matter because of how these cards work. So I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gigadramon. So Gigadramon can Digivolve off of black or red. So that allows us to actually use a red low end because of this ability. And then he has another ability where while this Digimon is in play during your turn, then this Digimon is treated as a red Digimon, again allowing us to use either red or black level 6s. So it doesn't necessarily matter that we're running different colors. He just shores up that downside so that way we could actually run both the colors as efficiently as we can. And then on top of that, he has an inheritable ability that's more supporting Gundramon, where it happens on the opponent's turn. This Digimon gets plus 2000 DP. Gundramon is a blocker, so it just makes him a stronger blocker to be using as a result. And then the other ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Megadramon. So Megadramon is acting very similar to Gigadramon, where it could Digivolve off of red or black, so it allows us to use red or black low end. It counts as a black Digimon while this Digimon is in play, so it's also counting as both red and black while he's on the field, allowing us to Digivolve into either red or black level 6s. And then on top of that, he has the inheritable ability that's more supporting Magna-Kidmon, but it's also decent on Gundramon as well, because it's just a generic DP boost ability, where during your turn, this Digimon gets plus 2000 DP, allowing whatever Mega we're using to be more aggressive. But again, Magna-Kidmon having Security Tech plus 1 natively, this is obviously the better choice to Digivolve into Magna-Kidmon with. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gundramon. So because this is the black base or black low end, Gundramon is the better card of the two to wanting to be support because black just has, well, natural synergy with black cards. And what this card is doing is still pretty decent, where he just has the blocker ability native to him. So he's just a blocker. So we could line him up with either of the ToyAgumons, and that's pretty good. We could line him up with Gigadramon, so that way he actually has 13,000 to be able to block some of the opponent's Digimon. So he's just a really good card to be using for the blocker ability alone. And then on top of that, he also has a nice when Digivolving ability, where we get to reveal the top 5 cards of our deck, then use 1 option card with a memory cost of 7 from among them for free. So free casting of options is very strong, especially since we have, well, very strong options to be using. And then on top of that, if we don't have an option to use off of this ability, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with a play cost of 4 or less instead. So even if this ability whiffs, we still have the potential for his ability to remove a Digimon on the field, and that's still just really, really good, making him just a fantastic card to be using overall. And then the last Digimon of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Magna-Kidmon. So Magna-Kidmon is doing some very similar things to Gundramon, except, well, he's red instead of black, so he doesn't naturally support the deck. He's just a good card for the deck because he's also with 3 Musketeers. He has Security plus 1 native to him. so he can deal some extra damage when we need him to. And then he has a very similar when digivolving ability where we could use a option card from our hand that has a memory cost of 7 for free. So again, free casting of our options is really good. And then if we don't have an option to use off of his when digivolving ability, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less. So again, just more removal for when we can't use our options, making him playable at all times, making him just a good Digimon to be using. And then as far as the option lineup goes, it's not really looking to change just because it's a very well-rounded option lineup. So they're all going to be the 3 Musketeers based options, so no matter which Digimon we're digivolving into, we have access to using all of these options because each of them have the ability where if we have a 3 Musketeers on our field, then we could use the option regardless of the color requirements. So it's just allowing us to easily use our options no matter which mega we're using. And then Schwarmer here has the main ability where we get to delete all Digimon with a play cost of 7 or less. So if the opponent's trying to build a wide board, this could help nuke the very wide board. And then it has the security ability of adding itself to our hand, so that way we could use it with Magna-Kidmon when it's checked in our security. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Fly Bullet. So even though we're not playing beelstarmon because beelstarmon is the most expensive 3 Musketeer and one of the most expensive cards in BT06, Fly Bullet is still a pretty cheap and efficient option for us to be using just because, well, we could run it because it plays with our 3 Musketeers still. So what this card is doing is it has the main ability to delete one of the opponent's Digimon that's level 6 or lower. So it's just acting as some solid single removal that we could delete a wide variety of different targets with, making it a very good card, especially since we get to ignore its color requirements because of how our 3 Musketeers work, and it also has the nice security ability of activating its main effect, so it's still a threat in security at worst. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Happy Bullet Showering. So Happy Bullet Showering, again, is a 3 Musketeers based option. Color doesn't really matter when we're playing it with our 3 Musketeers. And then on top of that, it has the main ability where we get to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest DP. So if there are any Digimon tied, it'll delete the Digimon that are tied, and it's still just acting as some very solid removal for the deck. If the opponent only has 1 Digimon in play, then it's just going to delete that 1 Digimon outright. Otherwise, it's always going to be targeting the weaker one, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not the greatest thing either. It's just a very fun removal card to be running because of that. And then it has the nice security ability of activating its main, adding a little bit more RNG aspects to the security ability, which could be pretty good. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Izzy. So Izzy is going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixing Tamer. So if our memory is ever less than 3, we'll always just hard set it to 3, which is really good, and the primary reason why we want a memory fixing Tamer to try to make our plays as efficiently as we possibly can. But Izzy helps with the black end just because Izzy's playability not only could potentially gain us a memory, but also have some good synergy to try to line up when we should be digivolving into Gundramon, because we get a look at the top 3 cards of our deck and then rearrange them in any order. And then if all of them are black, then we get to gain that memory, making him one of the more efficient memory fixing Tamers that we could be playing with. And then the last Tamer of the deck for the black base is going to be 2 copies of Izzy and Joe. So Izzy and Joe is a fantastic duo Tamer with a very easy ability where if the opponent has 2 or more Digimon in play, then we get to gain 2 memory. So it's a very easy way for us to gain 2 additional memory, and it's acting as some extra card draw for when our black Digimon gets deleted because of its ability where during the opponent's turn, if our black Digimon gets deleted, then we get to suspend them to draw a card. So it's just a fantastic duo Tamer for us to be using overall. So that was it for the black end of things. Now, if you want to run a red-based deck, then again, for the most part, your top end really isn't going to be changing. So as far as Digitamas go, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Demi-Meramon because it's one of the more good generic inheritable abilities we could be playing with on our Digitamas, because it's just a plus 1000 DP boost when we're attacking into the opponent's security, which the deck is more focused on Magna-Kidmon, so we definitely want to try to hit the opponent's security to take advantage of his security attack +1. So any way we can make him a little bit stronger is generally a good thing. But I'm going to be running 4 copies of Digimon from the Red Gallantmon starter deck, just because this card actually has some pretty decent synergy with the deck, just because 3 Musketeers is all about removal, and this card is rewarding you with a DP buff for removing the opponent's Digimon. So the DP buff is a plus 2000 DP boost that only happens once per turn, but it's still just a good inheritable that synergizes with the deck. Then I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon. So this is the Searcher Agumon that lets us try to find our Tamers by looking at the top 5 cards. So it doesn't necessarily matter what color the Tamers are. He's just looking for any Tamer. And because we are still going to be running Tamers in this version of the deck, it just makes it a really good card to try to find our Tamers. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the first starter deck Agumon, and this is just a generic inheritable ability of plus 1000 DP, making him just really good, so that way our Digimon can be as strong as they possibly can be. Then on top of that, we also have the other starter deck Agumon from the Gallantmon starter deck, just because this has a when attacking ability similar to Demi-Meramon's, where it's a plus 2000 DP boost when we're attacking into the opponent, so that's pretty good, making sure our Magna-Kidmon is as strong as it possibly can be. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Guilmon. So this is the starter deck Guilmon, and this Guilmon, even though we're not using the Warp ability, we are using him because his inheritable ability to draw us a card when we delete an opponent's Digimon is just that good because, well, we're a control-based deck. We have lots of ways of removing the opponent's Digimon, so having Guilmon be able to reward us by drawing a card for when we do that is really, really valuable. Next, I'm still going to be playing Deputymon, even though this is a black card in a red deck. We're never going to be Digivolving into him. We're just using him for his on-play ability, and because we could still use him to Digivolve into our ultimates, makes him still a very good card to be using. We're just forced to always hard play him, so it does limit our evolution lines, but it's not limiting our evolution lines by that much, and it's just a very solid utility card for all of the reasons why I laid out in the previous black deck. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Quadramon. So this is just the blocker slot of the deck. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're using Monochromon or Quadramon. It's just acting as the blocker role, so that way we have some form of defense. If you don't even want to run any defense in the deck and just have Gundramon be the blocker, that's fine as well. It is just, for the most part, a flex spot of the deck, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Quadramon. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Growlmon. So this is the starter deck version of Growlmon, and this is another very fantastic card just because, again, it has some synergy for when we delete the opponent's Digimon by allowing us to gain a memory back. So it just makes it Digivolving into our Mega level Digimon that much more efficient because we could actually not pass the turn when we Digivolve into him, because this could potentially gain us that 1 memory because they both are playing with abilities that want to delete the opponent's Digimon. And then, as I mentioned before, the top end is basically all the same. So 4 copies of Gigadramon because it's that transition Digimon. Yes, it's better supporting Gundramon, but we still need it because it's that transition Digimon. And then 4 copies of Megadramon because, again, second verse, same as the first. Transition Digimon, we have to run it because it's good. And then this time it's going to be only 2 copies of Gundramon because the deck is less focused on what Gundramon is doing and a little bit more focused on what Magna-Kidmon is doing. So Gundramon is just another good card to be running because he's also a blocker. When Digivolving to delete stuff and play our options for free, we just run him because he's good. And then it's going to be 4 copies of Magna-Kidmon because this is a red base, this is more aggressive, so we want to be focusing on the fact that we can make Magna-Kidmon as aggressive and efficient as we possibly can, just because the security tech +1 is just good. Red already likes that ability quite a lot, and on top of that, just the removal is still really, really good to combo with all of our Gallantmon-based cards. Then our options didn't change at all. It's just 2 copies of Gulchwarmer for that board clear, 2 copies of Fly Bullet for single target high-level removal, and 2 copies of Happy Bullet Showering as just the fun RNG card to be using. And then we're still going to be using Izzy and Joe, so Izzy and Joe still has some good synergy with the deck because we are still playing a couple of black Digimon in the deck, and it's still one of the better Tamers that also could help us play our Gulchwarmer even when we don't have a 3 Musketeers or black Digimon on our field. And then the memory fixing Tamer switches from Izzy to Tai just because, well, Tai is the best generic memory fixer we have for red. It combos very nicely with Musketeers, allowing us to gain some additional security tech plus if we're not digivolving him off of Deputymon, and that's just making him even more aggressive than he normally would be. But again, this is primarily in the deck because it's a memory fixing Tamer to always hard set our memory to 3 to make our plays as efficient as we possibly can. And then as far as some other cards that you could think about running in the deck, there are just a couple of different tech tools and options that you could be playing on a budget. So Junkmon is really fantastic because he has a nice inheritable on delete to gain 1 memory for when we're utilizing our blockers and whenever one of our Digimon just gets deleted in general, either gaining us a memory to enhance and extend some of our plays or reducing the opponent's memory for, deleting our Digimon. Then if you want, you could also play Greymon or ToyAgumon, just because they have a nice ability that's interacting with the reboot ability. So if you do line up that stack correctly, then this card's really good. But I'm not a super huge fan of it just because it does require you to actually have the reboot ability, and that's not something we're generally trying to play around with. Then on the red side of things, you could run Gaussmon just because Gaussmon is, well, I guess a pretty decent card because he could help limit and reduce some of the opponent's actions depending on the matchup, where the opponent won't be able to reduce their Digivolution costs, which is pretty good still. And on top of that, Gaussmon has the added bonus where the more Gaussmons we have in play, the stronger they'll get because they'll all get plus at 3000 DP for each of the other Gaussmons. Then you could run the starter deck Greymon just because this is one of the best inheritable abilities in red on the level 4 slot. So if you don't necessarily want to run the blockers or reduce some of the blockers, or even just reduce the Deputymon by 2 or something, then you could very easily squeeze this card in if you have it, just because the security tech +1 is just that good, allowing our Musketeers to hit even harder than before, and it allows also our Gundramon to even hit harder than he could before, just being a very good inheritable ability as a whole. Then, as I did mention before, we do have lots of level 7s that you could possibly run. The 2 best level 7s is going to be Omnimon Alter S, just because he's naturally already playing with red and black. And then the other best one that fits in this color pairing is going to be Ragnalordmon. Even if you don't use Ragnalordmon to gain the 3 memory back and run his little package, he's still just a very strong card to be running in his own right, just as a generically good level 7 Digimon. But black has more access to a whole bunch of other level 7s that you could run. Red has its own set of Omnimons that you could run, so there's just a lot of level 7s you have access to as a result. And then if you are running some Omnimons and you do want to try to squeeze in Transcendent Sword, this is a really good card to be running because it's a 7-costed option card in red that's basically acting as a mini Gaia Force, where it's deleting one of the opponent's Digimon with 11,000 DP or less, which is still pretty good levels of removal. And then if we have an Omnimon or Greymon on the field, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 15,000 DP or less, which just is even stronger than it normally would be before. And we do have access to a couple of different Greymons that you could run depending on what your low end is looking like. And we even do have different Omnimons that you could play, all depending on what you're actually trying to do with the deck. Then if you do want to run a purple base or just want to try to squeeze in some purple cards, Rebellymon acts as a purple-black transition card, so it'll always count as a black card while it's on the field, and it's naturally a purple card, allowing you to easily use your purple cards. Then, as I mentioned before, if you want to run the 3rd Musketeer and actually build 3 Musketeers, then you have beelstarmon to be playing with. I do think beelstarmon, like the others, wants you to play her more in a purple base than any of the other bases, but if you do just have like 1 or 2 copies of beelstarmon, she's just not a bad card to be running, because she reduces her own play cost for each option with that cost 7 in our trash, and each 3 Musketeers in our trash. And then on top of that, her on-play ability is just really good, allowing us to grab back an option that costs 7 from our trash into our hand, and then use an option that costs 7 from our hand for free. So just an absolutely insane card to be playing around with. And then we even have Intmon to just try to help out our 3 Musketeers, just because we could use this card to ditch a card from our hand to grab back a 3 Musketeer. Obviously, this wants to be played, again, more with beelstarmon, but it's still just a good card to be running for your other 3 Musketeers if you just need to try to reuse them and recycle them. And then one of the other best duo tamers that we could be playing around with is going to be Sora and Mimi. So Sora and Mimi is really good because its condition to gain the 2 extra memory is the opponent not having a level 4 or lower Digimon in play, which is very easy for this deck to do. So it's not like that's going to be super hard. It allows us to use Fly Bullet off color when we don't have any of our 3 Musketeers on our field. So that's also a really good thing to be running and taking into consideration. And even though most of the time, if we're not running beelstarmon, we won't be able to use her other ability to draw and discard when our purple Digimon attacks, she's still just a very solid card to be using just for that memory gaining ability alone. But you could also just not run any of the memory gainers and just allocate those slots into other areas. So just as a quick recap, the black end is going to be supporting Gundramon a little bit more, the red end is going to be supporting Magna-Kidmon a little bit more, and they're both, well, doing almost the exact same thing, just utilizing each of their respective colors' low ends to support the color that you're trying to play them with. So I think it doesn't necessarily matter which low end you go. There's still some solid flexibility to both of the colors, and I think 3 Musketeers as a whole is a very fun deck to be playing with as a result, just because of all of the different things that you could do with it, depending on what you're trying to focus on and what you're trying to gain out of the deck. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.